Well, hello everyone. My name is Karen Dalton, and I'm running against Scott Perry in the Republican primary in Pennsylvania's 10th Congressional District. I just want to give you my thoughts, if I could, about the events we see unfolding in Minneapolis and in other cities like Chicago and Portland. For starters, this is not rational immigration policy. The One Big Beautiful Bill Act threw people off of health care and SNAP benefits and closed the door to college education for those who can't just write a check in order to fund what we could only call lawless and violent roaming of ICE and Border Patrol agents through our cities. There has been more money pumped into ICE than ever before. Donald Trump has closed almost all of the legal pathways to citizenship, and he's fired the immigration judges employed by the Department of Justice. And he fails to recognize that under American law, anybody here, no matter how they got here from a different country, has the right to apply for asylum. That's the Immigration and Nationality Act. Now, my opponent, Scott Perry, hasn't said anything about this. I released a statement to the press yesterday, which I hope they'll print. And I also posted on Facebook about it, my position on immigration and ICE and the terrible and tragic killings and what I believe unjustifiable killings of Renee Good and Alex Pretti. But there have been other violent acts by ICE. And there have been people that have died in detention in ICE facilities, including a man from China who died in a facility in Pennsylvania. He was hog-tied, but if you look at the federal report that was issued, that was given to Congress, it says he committed suicide. What I've been doing is I've been looking through my Bible, trying to find some passage that would comfort me and other people. And I came upon the book of Esther. And given that today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, I believe that this is particularly poignant. So the book of Esther is one of my favorite books and stories in the Bible. What it essentially says is this: there was a king of Persia who was really dissatisfied with his wife. And back then, this is way before Me Too and the opening of our eyes about domestic violence and the idea that women could own property. But back then, a queen had to go to the king when the king summoned her. And the queen of Persia decided she wasn't going to go see her husband, the king. And so the noblemen got together with the king and said, we've got to get rid of the queen because other women will follow her example. So they got rid of the queen, Vashti, and then the king went on a search throughout all of Persia. Now, there was a young woman by the name of Esther who had been adopted by her uncle Mordecai. She was an orphan and a Jewish person. So even back then, Jews were dispersed throughout the Middle East. And she was beautiful, and she was smart, and she was engaging. And again, I'm getting this all from the book of Esther, which is named after her. So her uncle, Mordecai, found disfavor with Haman, who was the number one guy in Persia next to the king. And Mordecai, who was also Jewish, refused to bow down in front of Haman. And Haman then hatched a plot, went to the king and said, King, there are other people in your kingdom who are Jewish, who don't have our ways, and they should be killed. At the same time, Esther is now the new queen. But again, she's in the harem. She's not like the first ladies of the United States that have the ear of their husbands or can speak out on their own. This is way before Jesus was born. And so we have to remember the times they were living in. So Mordecai went to Esther and said, Esther, please, you have to speak to the king. You have to save our people. You have to save the Jewish people. And Esther said, if I go to the king without being summoned, I'll be killed. And Mordecai says, your silence will not save you. There will be other people that will come to our rescue. And how do you know that you have not been anointed for a time such as this? And then Esther goes to the king, even though she hasn't been summoned. And she says, if I perish, I perish, but I will go to the king. And she tells the king, over a period of 2 feasts, I think it is, if I'm remembering the story correctly, that she's Jewish. She finally unmasks herself as a person of the Jewish faith and says, Mordecai is planning to kill all my people. Please don't let this happen, king. And the king doesn't. He hears Esther, and Haman is thrown out of his job as prime minister. Mordecai takes his place. And Esther, I imagine, with the king, I suppose, although it doesn't really say much here about what happens after that, lives happily ever after. But the point is, silence will not save you. And I say this to Scott Perry, who hasn't posted or said, as far as I can see, anything about the events of Minneapolis or the tragic deaths of Alex Pretti or Renee Good or the violence. As you may or may not know, there was an American citizen by the name of Marimar Martinez who was shot 5 times by a Border Patrol agent in Chicago during Operation Midway Blitz. And that Border Patrol agent boasted about it, saying, 5 shots and 7 holes, put that in your book, boys. Now, I may be getting the text a little bit incorrect. I'm doing it from memory, but you can look it up online, or you can look it up in my statement that I released to the press yesterday, which is also posted on Facebook. So your silence will not save you. And how do we know we have not been anointed for such a time as this to speak up about what's happening in our country? And I just want to also, before I close, quote from the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging freedom of speech or the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble or to petition the government for redress of grievances. I'm Karen Dalton, and again, I'm running against Scott Perry in the Republican primary in PA 10. I just wanted to give you some thoughts today. If you'd like to learn more about me, please go to my website, vote KD for my initials 4C for Congress.com. You can learn about what I stand for and what I won't stand for. Thanks so much for listening. I hope peace is in our country today and in the world. Bye-bye.